to Lauren Chen recently, or on Twitter. One of her recent videos discussing the Gravel Institute coming out. She went pretty hard mask off. Now, for those of us who are familiar with Lauren Chen and been following her for a while, I mean, her white nationalism and stuff like that has been pretty well known. But so we knew it here. But this one really blew up on her, right? And so she gets upset. And you can see and hear the title of this episode, Socialist Lies. And we're going to just have fun at her molding.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show and thank you so much for tuning in. Today we are going to be talking about the dishonesty of Shoe on Head and also socialism in general. And I usually don't like to make videos that could be construed as being drama-centric. That's not the point of this channel. That's not what I'm here for. But I also don't like being lied about. So that's what we're going to do today, is clear some stuff up. And before we go any further,
We'll see how much she was lied about. Not going to clear any stuff yet. So she's going to shill here, but no. I mean, you're familiar here. I have clips. I have the receipts coming out.
I do just want to apologize if I look or sound under the weather. I woke up feeling completely fine, but around an hour ago, my nose started running like a faucet. Sorry for the graphic description, but it's true, and right now I'm not quite sure what's wrong. I'm hoping it's just allergies, but if my nose happens to get progressively redder throughout this episode, it's because I'm blowing it in between takes. So Shoe on Head is a very, very popular YouTuber who is probably best known for making anti-SJW, anti-feminist type of content, and the odds are that if you've somehow managed to find my content, you've definitely at least heard of her. She is huge, way bigger than I would ever hope to be. But what's interesting about Shoe is that her videos used to be really focused on cultural issues, things like mansplaining, the pink tax, and stuff like that, but lately it seems like she's more interested in hard politics. And in terms of politics, even though Shoe is probably best known for being anti-woke, she is a socialist. And no, I don't mean social democrat. She is just literally a socialist. And since I really don't want to be accused of misconstruing anyone else's beliefs in this episode, I have screenshots to back this up. So here we have a chat log from what looks like a Discord server, and just in case anyone isn't familiar with a Discord server, they're kind of like chat rooms. So it's very different than something like a DM, which would be more private, and I definitely wouldn't be okay with someone leaking those. But at one point, after being asked, why are you still so hesitant to call yourself a socialist, besides the PR thing, she replied, I just don't want to LARP as something I don't understand enough. Socialism on paper would be neat, but it's not going to happen, so we should get the country as close as possible, like the Nordic countries. To which the other person asked, and if we do get to the point where the Nordic countries are, then what? Would you be a socialist? And Shoe said, yeah, most likely. So the other person replied, so you're a socialist? To which she replied, no, I'm a social democrat, with the little echo parentheses thing. I know the term socialist is used against left-wing people a lot to kind of conjure up this Red Scare type of thing, but just know that when I say socialist in this context and in regard to Shoe on Head, I'm being serious. She's a socialist. Now, last week, or at least I think it was...
Well, I mean, given what Lauren Chen says, or talks about socialism and coming up here, she's got the typical kind of the Republican view on what socialism is, which is not what socialism is, right? And so the mix up and all that stuff there is just her playing games with it.
Last week, I did a video responding to the Gravel Institute, who are pretty much trying to be the socialist equivalent of PragerU. And one of the videos in particular of theirs that I responded to was all about how big government is actually good. And no, that's not oversimplification on my part or anything like that. It's actually advocating for big government. Keep that in mind going into this, and here is a particular clip that I think it's important you all see.
Like Germany or Finland, that have lower rates of poverty and higher rates of economic mobility. The American dream is more alive in these big government countries than in America.
There are a lot of differences between the US, Germany, and Finland. But if you ask a socialist why it is that Germany and Finland perform better than the US in certain metrics, they'll say it's because the government is bigger and the taxes are higher. That is the answer to prosperity. Is that right though? Are higher taxes and big government really the answer to Germany and Finland's success? It couldn't possibly be because they have overwhelmingly homogeneous populations. Right? Populations that, by the way, also have a higher average IQ and narrower distribution than the US does. If it was true that you could just big government and tax any population into happiness and success, then the story of the Soviet Union would be very different. I stand by everything.
And that's her mask off moment that she's getting upset that people are lying about her. So when she says homogenous populations, she's talking in higher IQ, she's talking about white people, right? And it's been pretty clear here.
Everything I said in that video, it is a huge oversimplification to try to attribute Germany and Finland's bigger governments and higher government spending levels to their lower poverty and higher economic mobility levels. The US.
So I don't know any studies about those particular countries, but JC Medlock on Twitter, who's a very good economics guy to follow, especially around taxes and spending and stuff like that and how they work, pointed out that when studying like Denmark or whatever, it was a response into something into a thread about these tweets or this video clip that before all the spending and stuff there, Denmark's social mobility is similar to the US's, and it's because of the extra spending that that they have the higher social mobility.
Has historically, thanks to chain migration, had tons of people coming into the country every year with less wealth, less education, and less skill than the native population. Of course.
So she's going to pretend, less education, less wealth, less skills, or whatever is why, is what she meant by less homogenous. And it's not the case, but we'll keep going here a little bit here before we get into the receipts.
Of course, when every single year you have people coming in who maybe don't speak your language so well, probably don't have a lot of savings themselves, and may not be very skilled workers, there's going to be a certain amount of poverty that comes alongside that. And I still very much believe in the American dream. I think in America, you are more likely to succeed than anywhere else, but still, that success takes time. And it is true that recently Germany has been taking in a larger share of migrants, but that still doesn't compare to the generations and generations that has been going on in the US. And of course, it is true that there are tons of immigrants in Germany and the US and every country you can think of who are not only very well educated, but actually better educated and wealthier than the native population of the country they're moving to, but still, by and large, most countries work with some sort of family reunification plan when it comes to immigration, and things like skill level or job prospects aren't always the top priority when letting in immigrants.
So, none of that has anything to do with the country's social mobility, right? And those government programs working, right? And helping to create that social mobility, right? Just because you might be a poor immigrant that comes in doesn't, right? And this is the big thing of the American dream that, Lauren Chen, quote unquote, conservatives think is there. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps and you make it up through here, right? Because America's the land of opportunity and you can make something of yourself. So you can come in poor and you can grow up out of here. And stuff. So like, well, no. These programs won't work or anything like there because they're already coming over poor, right? And that's where the poverty is, all right? So, well, ignore the immigrants here. What about the African-American community and the stuff that has historically happened to them in this country, right? She's going to leave it all out. I'm not quite ready for the receipts yet. They're spicy.
In case anyone thinks I'm saying all immigrants are poor and uneducated, that's simply not true, but it is just a fact that many immigrants who do come to Western countries are hoping to get either a better education or better job prospects. And IQ absolutely affects income. There have been studies on this. If someone has a higher IQ, they are less likely to live in poverty. That's pretty much all I have to say.
Again, studies also show poverty has an impact on IQ development and stuff in here, right? We know that. That's why, hey, make the investment in helping the poor in your country.
say about that, but again, if you haven't seen all of that video, I do suggest you go and check it out just to get a better sense of what I and the Gravel Institute were each trying to argue. We are not done with our current saga, but before we go on, I want to save you some money. That's right, I want to save you money on car and homeowners insurance. Stop overpaying on your car and homeowners insurance. Go to Gabi.com/Lauren.
Thanks for the follow, public citizen.
Gabi.com/Lauren so they know that our show is the one that sent you. The reason why I mention all of that is because it turns out on social media, someone chose to clip part of my video and share it. And here is the clip that's been circulating. There are a lot of differences between the US, Germany, and Finland. But if you ask a socialist why it is that Germany and Finland perform better than the US in certain metrics, they'll say it's because the government is bigger and the taxes are higher. That is the answer to prosperity. Is that right though? Are higher taxes and big government really the answer to Germany and Finland's success? It couldn't possibly be because they have overwhelmingly homogeneous populations. Right? Populations that, by the way, also have a higher average IQ and narrower distribution than the US does. I still do agree with everything I'm saying in this clip, but I think it's interesting that this person in question chose to remove the context of the Gravel Institute video that I was responding to. The Gravel Institute video advocating for big government and trying to attribute Germany and Finland's successes to specifically their big government and their high government spending. Now, when Shu saw this,
Yeah, but the issue isn't with you disagreeing with that. The issue is with you, you and your racism. And the dog whistling. Oh, yeah. We're going to get into her spicy takes here as she tries to play it off as, no, that's not what I was saying. Receipts are coming.
Clip, her response was, mixed race person living in Canada telling Americans they can't also have healthcare because America is too racially diverse. I am exhausted.
Spot on, Shu. Right?
What? First off, I really do love being called mixed race person. I mean, that is what my close friends and family refer to me as. So I just love when that can be brought to political conversations.
Yeah, that's her passive aggressiveness about that.
Fun. But also, I am not telling Americans anything any more than I am telling German or Finnish people stuff. It's simply a conversation about the merits and detriments of big government.
You work for the Blaze, you're punting for the Blaze, right?
As an American or whoever, you can do whatever you want with that information. And on top of that, saying that a population is homogenous is not the same as saying that, oh, it's just not racially diverse. There's a lot more that goes into homogeneity, especially when we're talking about a socioeconomic issue like big government and poverty levels, economic mobility, things like that. My video wasn't even about healthcare.
So, receipt on what she is. So this is a bunch of bullshit. Everybody who's followed Lauren Chen for at any point in time knows this is a bunch of bullshit, and we're gonna back that up. So I got 3 different links here at different times in this same video. That's just Blaze's Lauren Chen hate speech compilation from last November, so about a year ago.
I definitely don't want to see why it's extinct from the planet at all. And I think if we look at the regressive left, there are active, I think, efforts to try and discourage white people from doing things like having children, to try and encourage population replacement. That I think, if you look at Time Magazine, again, like I've tweeted about this before, on one hand you say like there's a cover saying like child-free life, why it's amazing. The next thing they're talking about why we need mass third world immigration because the population levels are too low, right? I don't think you can look at that and say like, oh no, there's no agenda here. I think the regressive left absolutely has an agenda with that. Where I wish that things were different though, I mean, because like right now Western values, they're so inherently tied to white people, and it's very true as someone who loves Western values and embraces them. I wish that more other cultures would as well, but for the moment that's not happening. And I think that is a fault that the West, we're so, I don't want to use the word cucked because I think that's overused that it's lost its meaning.
And that's why I wanted to talk about.
So that's the first clip I wanted to show from that one. What do you think she means when she says homogenous population? It ain't this shit that she's trying to spin there. Ah, fuck. I was there. I got another one. Just to hammer home here. We'll listen to her one statement here, and then we'll bring it in. One more first.
It's about big government, and I don't think I even mentioned healthcare once. But if you want to talk about healthcare, shoot, there is healthcare in America. You could maybe say there's not a universal single-payer system in America, but that doesn't mean there's no healthcare, okay? There is healthcare. I just had to fly my parents down to the US because my father got a scan revealing he had liver cancer, and he went months in the Canadian healthcare system with no follow-ups. All right? So there's your Canadian healthcare system for you. And you know what? I'm not saying the American healthcare system is perfect, but I am sick and tired of the narrative that because Canadians have government healthcare, they're not able to contribute to the healthcare debate. That is the opposite of what is needed, because socialists like you are under the assumption that everything is a utopia. It's all fairy tales and roses in Canada because we have this beloved government system, and that is not the case.
So that's a lie. If you listen to any socialists and stuff, like, so, and I'm not a socialist, but if you listen to, like, Lance from the Surfs and those guys, he's a Canadian, and he'll talk about the healthcare system and stuff. This big old crying tears and stuff over it and stuff, you know. Sorry for Dad if she didn't get the proper things, but we can't back up, we can't verify any of this stuff here. This is all just a personal anecdote. It means nothing in this conversation. But the whole idea of bringing up the healthcare as one point is because, oh, that's big government, you can't do it there. But her idea that, oh, Americans have healthcare, there's healthcare, it's like people don't have access to it, right? A large portion of it don't, right? You go in, for most people, if you get some kind of healthcare stuff too, you run, might use the emergency room as something there. You get these outlandish bills, you can't afford it, you go bankrupt, all this other stuff that happens from how our healthcare system works. And people like Shu want to fix it, but people like Lauren, the first thing they say is, well, one of the things against it is, well, your population is not ethnically homogenous enough, right? You know, not enough high IQ people on the system, right there, stuff. And she wants to pretend that it's not about race, and that's what it is.
People die up here waiting for care, and you know what? One of the reasons.
So that is not true. Like emergency care and stuff. And there are things that are life-threatening, things are prioritized, that'll be pushed to the front, right? And I've heard it across everybody that conservatives like Lauren Chen will say is why, oh, America doesn't want to go to some kind of universal coverage or anything like that, because then you can't get care. In America, people don't get care because they can't afford it, right? They'll put seeing their doctor off as long as possible until whatever's afflicting them becomes way too much. Now, at that point, there's nothing that can be done, but they can't afford to go take care of it sooner, right? So there is a rationing system here under there. But as for like the life-threatening stuff, that stuff is usually front of the pack in all these universal healthcare systems, right? If you have, say, like a knee replacement might take you months to go in and get something there, right? Because it's not something that's life-threatening, you know, unless you're willing to go off onto the private one and get it done sooner. But like something like cancer and stuff like that, no, that's not something you're going to wait on.
Reasons why our healthcare system is so inundated in Canada is because we have taken on waves and waves of migrants who are now using the healthcare system that they have not paid into. So yeah, here is a mixed race person living in Canada.
So, I don't know how the tax system works in Canada, but it works anything like the US. Immigrants pay taxes, right? They pay in, Lauren, right? So you're just lying through your teeth.
Canada, who has some thoughts about healthcare. Is that all right with you, white American? Do I have your permission to share these opinions? And by the way, none of this should be construed as me defending the American healthcare system. I mean, the American healthcare system as it is right now was put in place by the Democrats, so why would I? It just...
Oh, so now it's, oh boy. Yeah, so this is basically saying the American healthcare system should be, you know, free for all, nothing belonging anywhere, right? It's obvious. It comes from the conservatives. What the Republicans want in this country, right, is to fuck over people, right, instead of dealing with the issues.
Frustrates me when people defend a system like Canada's that they are clearly so uninformed about. Anyway, about that clip featuring yours truly, Shu also went on to say, "Sorry Americans, you can't have healthcare like the rest of the developed world because the Browns." Again, did not say that. Not at all. You have to be
That is what you said. 100%. We all heard it. We all understand it. And like in the first receipt, that's what it is. Now let's hear her wash away and we'll get into the next receipt.
pretty slimy to take a conversation about big government and big government spending and twist it into, oh, so you don't want people to have healthcare. And not even you don't want people to have affordable healthcare or government provided healthcare. She's literally just saying you either love big government or no healthcare at all. And what
That isn't what she's saying. This is you being real cagey and being real dumb.
What is this notion that just because most migrants
And flailing around pretty hard to try to put the mask back on. But I mean, she's had the mask off on the show before, so anybody who's followed knows that she meant race and stuff.
nowadays are brown, I can't criticize mass migration without blaming it on brown people specifically. Like, that's some BS right there. There are
Again, in the first receipt, she was talking about replacing white people with immigration, right? The great replacement theory, right? So she was talking about white people. So here's receipt number 2.
To address the fact that, you know, people like Black Lives Matter are so racially, I guess,
shit,
so
was this the
racially
one I wanted?
motivated, right? You know, for me as an egalitarian, I'm not going to say, you know,
Oh, it's a long one.
no
so it
white
must be
identity
in the later
politics
half
for
of
you,
this.
but for the
So she's talking about Black Lives Matter
it's okay,
here, but we'll
right?
go
That's
on.
a double standard, and I think that the alt-right is kind of a reaction to that double standard. Yeah, I'm not an ethno-nationalist, and
Yeah, this is what
but
I wanted.
okay, with the dangers of, you know, population replacement, I do believe that that is still a danger even when talking about high IQ immigrants, and I do believe that, you know, if we were to just open up the United States even to large numbers of skilled immigrants from, let's say, India and China, that, you know, there would be potential danger to American culture, right? And so something else that I support about the RAISE Act is that it actually limits like overall numbers of immigration, right? It's not just changing who can come in, it's also changing the number of people coming in. Now, I think that's important, not from a racial perspective personally, but from a cultural perspective, right? You know, I'm fine with Indian immigrants coming over here, but the fact of the matter is, if you let in large numbers of any demographic group, they're way less likely to assimilate. So I think by limiting numbers, you're actually increasing the chances of, you know, people not just coming over and forming like cultural ghettos, which we do see happening, especially in Europe. You're actually increasing the chances of them assimilating. So yeah, that's another reason why I'm
which party
Ooh, boy. Definitely doesn't want the brown people over here, whether they're skilled or not, for the most part, right? She says, "Oh, it's culturally, that's all that matters." But in the earlier clip, well, even in the earlier part of there, it was the great replacement theory again, right? So she's a proponent of that stuff, right? And so, well, we're not ethnically homogenous enough as they are. That doesn't mean race. That doesn't mean race. Of course, it means race, Lauren.
tons of amazing immigrants out there who, yeah, are not white and they're very skilled, and that's fine, but come on. Mass migration absolutely has cultural and political effects on Western countries, and I mean, I don't think that should be off limits in terms of criticism just because right now those migrants happen to be brown and socialists apparently love to call people racist. Obviously, when it comes to politics,
I mean, you are racist, Lauren. I just dropped 2 receipts on you. We got another one coming through here later that we'll drop and get a third one.
Shu and I don't agree, which is fine. That's not necessarily a problem in and of itself. But yeah, don't lie about what people have or have not said. It's not a good look. Just because you're a socialist, that doesn't mean you have to be a lying socialist. Anyway, through all of these posts, I did end up having some interactions with other socialists, and some of them I thought were pretty interesting, so I figured for the rest of the episode, we could go through some of those. One person...
So we'll drop... All right, we'll do this here, right? We'll do this receipt first, and then we'll come back to this. Final receipt in this clip. And this is on her show, in front of her fans. that are watching this video that's saying, "Oh, I'm not racist" or anything like that.
Different races and cultures living together.
So I don't think I was quite on point on there. So let's go back just a hair.
This whole idea of different races and cultures living together side by side, it's not really been tried before. It really hasn't. If your first response to some
So what do you think a homogenous population means, right? She's gonna go off and try to walk away with the homogenous population means, right? She's wrong on this clip. Like multiculturals, multicultural, multi-ethnic civilizations exist and have been a thing throughout history, right? Especially when you get to like large cities, trading cities, all that stuff. Plenty of back and forth. We'll hop right back in and we'll see how we do here. But as we've seen, homogenous to her is definitely race. That's the mascot thing, especially when she backs it up with IQ, which is also an alt-right talking point and things like that.
wrote, explain why population differences will have different needs in healthcare, and explain it in a way that doesn't involve race. It's not about having different healthcare needs, it's about having different abilities to pay for healthcare. And this whole racial thing, it's funny that whenever you mention homogeneity in a population, these people always think the first thing you must be referring to is race. No.
As we've seen, that's what she's referring to. She's walking that back as much as she can. But, as I said, provided the receipts, that's what she's talking about. But watch this. This gets a little funny, too, with what she wants to...
Demographics is not a synonym for race. Immigration is not a synonym for race. IQ is not a synonym for race. Education level is not a synonym for...
Those first three are all meant to mean race, right? Not letting the brown people in. Not letting the black people in, right? We want to keep it white, Lauren, right? Just like you said in that first receipt we dropped.
For race. But I replied, if you have a huge sector of your population that is less educated, less skilled, and less wealthy than the rest of your population, it causes a bigger strain on those who have to fund redistributive programs. Keep in mind that my...
So that's not a good argument. So let's go back to the tweet here. So how do we get them more educated? How do we get them more skilled, right? How do we make them more wealthy, right? But I love the less wealthy, like, and plenty of the socialists jumped on it. So I think it even made like accidentally left wing, right? When talking about less wealthy, whereas you want to bring the inequality down to and level the playing field and stuff. If you're socialist, but largely in case even if you're like me, who's a progressive liberal, right? Do away with inequality because the mass inequality and stuff is just not good economically, right? It doesn't. You have a shrinking velocity of what is it? The shrinking velocity of the dollar and stuff like that. And things like that. And so with the velocities up, you got growth and all that other stuff. But when you get mass inequality, that velocity slows down and your growth slows down. So it's not good for you there either. But we can invest in education, in skill building and stuff like that. And that's what Democrats want with the government programs and all this other stuff here. The GI Bill, right? And this is a long-standing talking point in studies. For every dollar we spent in the GI Bill for education and stuff for soldiers, we got $7 back in the economy, right? So it was a net benefit to us to spend that money, to make that investment, right? Smart investment. So what she's arguing is, well, you can't have big government, you can't tax and spend, do all this other stuff because it's not going to do anything. So there's like, no, like you look at any mainstream orthodox economics and stuff like that. Depending on how you spend the money, you can get the results you want out of there, and you can improve these things, right? And this is what J.C. Medlock was talking about when he was talking about how without the spending and stuff that Denmark does, because he used the Denmark example in there, their social mobility is similar to what the U.S. is. But with that spending in there, their social mobility is higher, so they can get from, the poorer parts of society up to middle class, maybe even in a smaller amount, obviously, maybe go up to becoming rich themselves, right? At a better rate than what the U.S. does.
bigger strain on those who have to fund redistributive programs. Keep in mind that my original video was
But like if you're getting $7 back, like in the GI Bill, right? So if you're, that's $7 of growth to the $1 you spent, everybody's profiting $6, right? Per person, right? That's getting benefited from there. Now, obviously, there's a oh god, why am I drawing a blank on the term? I shouldn't. Oh, I'm forgetting the term. I'm just blanking on it. But basically, where the return on investment decreases at a certain point, right? Drawing a blank.
not about healthcare, it was about big government in general. But as long as we are going to be talking about healthcare, the fact is that if there are a lot of people who haven't paid into a healthcare system, either because they weren't in the country before or because they've just not been able to financially contribute to the healthcare system, rich people's tax dollars will only go so far. You can't have.
So when you come in and you start working, we start taking taxes out of your paycheck. That's what the payroll tax is for, to fund things like Social Security, to Medicare, Medicaid, right? Those taxes come out once you come into the country and start working, right? Nobody's saying that they just show up in the country, they never worked, and so they're obviously never going to pay taxes, anything at all. Or when they live in the country, right, and say we have like a VAT tax or something like that, or we have sales tax here in the U.S. But like I said, I refer to JC Medlock. Like if you want things on taxes and the effects and the economic studies and all that stuff, he's your go-to guy to go ask questions to about it. They're really good, but. So we have a VAT tax or whatever. They're still taxing their consumption. We can take that money that's raised from there and redistribute it around the program, right? There's ways to generate revenue. That's what taxes are for. And they come here and they're going to play taxes, right? Like stuff like that. And you can fund these programs. So this argument is worthless.
Have an unending supply of people who don't.
And it's just kind of pull back so that the obviously racist connotations that you're making are what they were.
Put money into the healthcare system, because then your healthcare system is going to collapse. And it's here that I would like to point out that the US does have government-funded healthcare to a certain extent. Things like Medicaid and Medicare are examples of government-provided health.
Shu is a Bernie supporter, like I was, and supports Medicare for All, expanding those programs to cover everybody. Right? That's what she wants.
Care. Conceptually, I'm not against programs like that, but there's a big difference.
No, conceptually, you're against programs like that, right? This is, if we were in a situation where we wound all this stuff back and we could get rid of that stuff, like we were sitting in that situation, like she likes to say, Schuenhet's obviously a socialist because if we lived in, say, a country that was like Denmark or Finland or Norway, Sweden, the Nordic countries that she points to, in those original Discord chat logs, where she said, yeah, she'd probably be a socialist at that point, a full-out socialist. So in Lauren's case, those programs, look, I have nothing against those programs in concept, and it's like, well, once you get to the point to where you could actually have the power to cut those programs, you're against those programs in concept. You're just not at the point where you can do that because both those things are very popular, right? Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. These are all like some of the most popular programs, like the Tea Party, right? The taxed enough already movement. Said get your hands off my Social Security, get your hands off my Medicare, all this other stuff, right? And those are supposed to be the real conservative stuff. So the people in the movement on that stuff like those things, even Republicans and conservatives. So she's not in a position where she can say no to those yet. But if they, Republicans, Trump's future, Trump or whoever comes after Trump, gets enough power, and then now with what's likely going to be, because I think ACB is still going to be confirmed. I don't think there's anything that's going to pull that back. The majority that's going to favor those, the Republicans and their legislation going forward, more and more of that stuff goes bye-bye. Even if they have to go through the Supreme Court to get rid of it. Instead of, doing it through legislation like Trump is trying to do with the ACA right now.
Difference between that and just literally full-on socialized healthcare. To which Josephine Matthias replied, and by the way, I'm not calling her a socialist here. I know she's on the left, but I don't think she's full on socialist. Anyway, she asked, okay, but why do you think a huge sector of the population is less educated, less skilled, and less wealthy? And how do we improve that? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And personally, when I look at the people who are less educated and less skilled and less wealthy out there, I want to do things like fix the education system. That is a huge one. And no, that doesn't just mean spending more money on schools. That means things like school choice and trying to introduce competitiveness back into the education system. Second, government.
So, pushing for school choice, charter schools and stuff, in certain situations, they could work, right, and could be beneficial. I mean, the data I've seen says in the best scenarios, they're, roughly on par with public schools as is, maybe a little better in certain here. But a lot of the charter schools are fly by night, make money off the government, do nothing, and fuck the kids that are in there, right? They are, being run by a corporation, being run all this other stuff. So what they do is they don't actually spend the money that they're getting through, like the school choice vouchers and stuff like that, to go over to these charter schools. They're not spending the money on the kids, right? They're cutting as much as they can so they can keep as much of it as profit for themselves, right? They're not improving education results. They're not doing any of that stuff. Now, if you want to talk about one of the big things we can get rid of is how we do school districts and stuff now, right? And that's a large part through like redlining and stuff, why communities that are largely African American, minority and stuff, or have poorer schools, right, is how we fund our schools now. We can radically change on how we fund them so that we can get better results and not base it on things that have systemically racist things. Policies like redlining and stuff have caused the kind of collapse and degradation within our poorer communities, right? Those are things we can fix here, right? And how we go about funding our schools. But that's not necessarily what Lauren is proposing. Now, maybe if we take like the most charitable and the best possible way the school choice, and says, well, instead of going to school in this poor school, we can go to school over in the neighborhood that's paid better and stuff here. But even with the choice, there's still the issue of the funding for those schools, right? Like, and how you handle the kids that can't afford to send their kids, to the wealthier school, right? Across the way, right? What does there? It doesn't change anything for them there, and all it does is pull more money out of the schools that aren't already, that are struggling as is, because they're based on how we fund our schools. They're not getting much funding to begin with, right? So it just makes it worse for them.
Regulation on the economy also has a huge impact on people's finances. We saw in the US under the Trump administration, when they were rolling back all of those regulations, that unemployment rates for Black Americans, women, Hispanic Americans, so many groups were at historic lows. And finally,
so this is true about it being there, but that's just because the unemployment was at the historic lows. But it wasn't because the causal factor she provides for it is wrong, right? We were already trending downwards. Like, I've said this before in multiple other response videos and debates and stuff like that here, talking about we were on 138 consecutive months of growth and improvement, right? Which is the longest stretch of growth in U.S. history. So basically, it was happening under Obama and Biden and stuff. Their administration was still going good. Trump inherited the economy and stuff that was improving, was doing well, adding more jobs. And so his pulling back all the regulations and stuff didn't create more jobs, didn't do any of that. It wasn't some savior thing for her. It's just, or savior thing, or what was I trying to say there? It wasn't like, ooh, Trump lowered the unemployment rate and stuff there. It's like, no, he didn't. Those policies weren't the cause of that. They were already on that trajectory beforehand. And now we've lost them and more, right? Trump is scheduled, if he loses, will be the first president in, I don't know if in history or in the last century, where he left with less jobs than what he came in with, right? That's what we're looking at. So bragging about all the things he did that break those jobs, save those jobs, this recession we're in is, if you want to go that way, it's all on Trump.
For certain countries more than others, I think immigration plays a huge part of why certain segments of the population specifically are less educated, less skilled, and less wealthy than the others. So there are ways to increase.
That doesn't make any sense though, right? Like if you have schools, right? Like if immigrant comes in here, right? They're going to go to school, they're going to go to public schools and stuff. If you have good schools and stuff, their kids are going to be more educated, right? Over time. You give them better opportunities, you invest in that stuff, and eventually they can move up the ladder, right? Even if their parents come in at the very bottom rung, right? If we do our job there as a government and stuff there, and as a society, those things are possible, right? And even if they don't move out of there, we can improve the condition of everybody in that group, and not just say, well, fuck it, you're gonna stay in that group forever, and fuck you guys.
Increase people's levels of wealth and skill and education that don't mean we all have to become socialists. Next, someone else asked, so if it's not racial
So a government healthcare program or government spending is not socialist. And see, this is her pulling the traditional card that, oh, you spend any big money government stuff there means you're a socialist. No, you don't, right? That's not socialism, right? That's not socialism in any form, right? The two things that socialists look at is worker control of the means of production and the end of the commodity form are two of the major components you got to need for that. And so a big government spending it here, we're like, well, we haven't gotten rid of the commodity form and workers don't own the means of production. So how is this at all a socialist policy? And like welfare programs predate even capitalism, right, as a concept, right? You can go back to ancient Rome. They had as far as we know, the earliest form of a social welfare in there. What was it? Annae, Curnae, something like that. It was basically a grain dole for citizens that lived in Rome. And at its peak, it was like 250,000 Romans were getting this grain dole, as social welfare.
homogeneity you want. What kind of homogeneity is it, Lauren? And here, I just want to say that there is a big difference between me saying homogeneity explains why Finland is different than the US, and me saying I want more homogeneity. They're not the same. But I responded, education.
I mean, no, that is what you're saying, right? Like, that's what you said in the receipts, right? You don't want the immigrants coming over to replace white people. You're promoting the great replacement theory, all that other stuff. So you want a more homogenous society, right? And you saying that, well, you can't have those things because you're not homogenous. Like the next step for those things, like if you want to convince people that they want it like the white people and stuff. This is the Richard Spencer model, because Richard Spencer supports like Medicare for white people, right? For all white people. And you say, well, we can have that when we get rid of the brown people, right? We kick them out. We kick the immigrants out and do all that other stuff. And it's like, that's the next step for that argument about the homogeneity. And we know Lauren Chen's a white nationalist. She tries to play it off that she's not, but from her own words, it's clear as day.
Wealth, skill, language, culture, religion, like literally all parts of society. I think it's pretty obvious that if a society has a robust middle class, then a redistributive program like universal healthcare will be less impactful than if the society is a bunch of impoverished people with just a few wealthier people. To which someone who is so smooth-brained, I assume the inside of their skull contains a beach ball, wrote, "You want a society where people have homogeneous amounts of wealth?" Obviously, the implication there is that I'm advocating, without knowing it, for socialism or communism to redistribute wealth.
I mean, if you want those programs or whatever, you say that that's what we gotta have, right? But yeah, oh Lord.
It's very telling that these people can only imagine a society with relatively equal amounts of wealth through redistribution and the state. It can't just be that I'm advocating for a highly effective, highly educated workforce. No. It's gotta be through the government taking from people to give to others.
I mean, how do you get that education to go where you want to go? Like, it's not... to have that, you have to have a universal system in some way. Like, so like the the implementation of public schooling, right, which we made a priority in this country, is a big reason why we were able to increase the productivity skills and stuff through high school and all that, compared to when we were sending kids off to work in factories as 6-year-olds or whatever, running around trying to reach into those moving machines and all that other stuff, child labor and things like that. When we turned around and invested in that stuff, we continue to grow into the superpower that we are today. And she's kind of against that kind of investment, right? She's like, well, oh, if you just give them choice and let them run for profit, it'll work. It's like, it's not going to. It doesn't, right? It hadn't passed. It doesn't. It's not going to do it now. And somehow we're going to go do it. And it's like, you don't have to go and redistribute wealth and like take somebody else's wealth and give it down and have it here. But you tax people that can more afford it, which is perfectly fine under capitalism, right? Go read Adam Smith, right? When Adam Smith talks about taxes, that they should come from the people that can most afford to pay them, right? Which is a progressive tax system, right? That's the father of capitalism right then and there, right? Or modern free market capitalism, right? That we want to go to.
I think we'll leave things there for now, but I do want to leave you.
Yeah, it's not. I said it earlier. The redistribution of wealth is dumb, right? It's, workers own the means of production, eliminate the commodity form, and several other key things to make socialism. Now, some people will say that if you just say, well, just the workers own it, then it's socialism. Now, me being the capitalist and stuff, I don't think, worker co-ops or anything like that eliminates capitalism and makes socialism, right? If you have those can exist within a capitalist system. And they do exist. There are some examples in the capitalist system that a lot of socialists point to. But I'd be in agreement with like Marx and Engels against the whole market socialism idea that Vosh pushes. Like, well, everything's a co-op and therefore we have socialism. And it's like, no, we don't agree. That's socialism. Yeah, social programs predate capitalism, right? Like I brought up the Roman welfare state under the empire, right? The grain dole that at its peak gave 250,000 roughly estimated Roman citizens, at least in the city of Rome. We don't know necessarily about outside the empire or outside of Rome, the city itself. A grain dole every year, right? Romans weren't a capitalist society at all. Yeah, the clergies and stuff. Yeah, there's religious schooling and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it comes the advancements in schooling. Like, there's a bunch of places you can point through the schooling and education that gave rise to the modern form and stuff, right? Like, there was pushes by like Alfred the Great to improve education. There was enforcements under during the Carolingian Renaissance, which gave rise to what we call medieval scholasticism, right? And which is kind of the basis and the foundation for the modern university system. Like, you can even go back to even earlier than that there was some form of basic education guaranteed to kids. Like they talk about it if you read anything about like ancient Greece and stuff like that. Now, how many people had access to everything and universal and stuff like that, we don't know, but there's like a certain point or a certain level that you'd learn so much. Yeah, they're talking about averages for different races. So when you pair that with homogeneity, and you mentioned IQ and all, I mean, it's largely the races, right? So to jump into the conversation going on in chat, because we're at the end of the video.